biggest indicator that I've noticed in every client that I've ever had. The second is the lack of accountability. And lastly, somebody who likes to.
Hello, and welcome back to Legally Uncensored. I am your host, Demetria L. Graves, a certified family law specialist in the state of California. And I am so excited today because we have a very special guest, Mr. Marcus Weaver, better known as Weav Told Me on Instagram. He is a certified coach specializing in relationships, career and professional development, and personal development, and building long-lasting relationships. Not only is he inspiring and funny, if you follow him on Instagram, but he also delivers real talk. If you're not following him, you need to. So please do yourself a favor and check him out on his YouTube channel, Weav Told Me, and all social media platforms. Weav, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you sharing the platform and looking forward to chopping it up here.
So you're here because I typically, do like everyone else, and I'm scrolling down social media. One, you're very consistent. So I appreciate that. And two, although your videos are short on Instagram, you are so informative, right? And so in the space that I'm in, divorce, I also, have to deal with the emotional turmoil a lot of people are going through once they come to me. However, I didn't know how toxic some of the relationships that my clients were coming out of. And so that's why I think people such as yourselves are important, because I can only deal with so much in my space and what I'm doing. So your work and your knowledge is very important. But before we get into it, tell us more about who you are and how you got into this space.
So a couple of things. First, I'm a husband. I've been with my wife for 15 years. I'm a father. I have two beautiful daughters, 15 and 5. Mentor, coach, entrepreneur. In my other business life, I'm a recruiter. So I do a lot. I think from a business perspective, there are a few reasons why I kind of decided that this would be a passion for me, or be kind of my life's work in helping abuse survivors, narcissistic abuse survivors. I think the first is based on personal experience, both in previous relationships before I met my wife, dealing in a co-parenting space. So I'm sure you are familiar with that, with your expertise. And it's into your friendship that I once had with a really close friend. And it's difficult to try and describe to somebody like the type of confusion, the anger, the emotional effects, like dealing with narcissistic people, and like how it affects your just physically, emotionally, spiritually. So as I began researching down the rabbit hole, I realized that the research was literally in its infancy stage from a narcissism standpoint, even though it's been around for over 100 years. But I also recognized that there was a void in having a voice, A, a person of color, but B, a man who's experienced it. But I didn't just want to be an advocate. I also wanted to share my story, and through the process of healing after it. And since it's a journey, it's been amazing seeing and hearing so many survivors' stories, welcoming and knowledgeable people that have gained by just kind of understanding their value in the process. So,
well, I definitely share your platform, as Crystal told you, with her and anybody that will listen to me, because there's a lot of insight there. And so for people that don't know much about narcissism, because a lot of people don't realize it until they're coming out of it, what they're dealing with, how would you describe what narcissism is?
Easiest way for me to describe it at its core is narcissism is somebody that has an extreme level of self-importance, somebody that seeks and needs attention and validation, and they need for others to admire them. But there's also a flip side to that, which is if we're talking about somebody who has NPD, as in narcissistic personality disorder, there's a lot of qualifiers. They have a preoccupation with power. They're extremely entitled. They're interpersonally exploited for their own gain. They're arrogant. And I don't mean just, hey, I'm looking clean today. I mean, like beyond that. My personal favorite kind of indicator is they lack empathy. They have a need to be admired. And finally, it's kind of weird, but they're envious of other people, even though they hide it kind of behind insecurity. And psychologically speaking, narcissism is a personality trait, and it's on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. So we all have degrees, right? We're all a little non-empathetic in some situations. So in those instances, when I'm referring to somebody who's experienced narcissistic abuse, we're talking about the extreme levels. You know, those people who come out of relationships and divorces confused, in utter disarray, needing a lawyer, but also a therapist, a coach, a pastor, whatever it is they need to kind of get them through.
So how do you know if someone, because we hear about narcissism way more now than we ever have. How do you know someone is a narcissist and not just a jerk or an asshole?
First, I think it's important to note, since I get this question from like clients all the time about narcissists in general, not your question, but the question in general, that narcissists aren't born. They're bred to be that way. And when you have the opportunity to unpack somebody's childhood, whether they come from like an unhealthy home, whether they're coupled with that with an unsupportive community, they haven't seen what love and affection from parents and guardians is supposed to look like. It's literally like a breeding ground to develop those characteristics, you know, that we spoke about previously. But distinguishing a narcissist and someone who is just a jerk is seen as somebody who lacks empathy, compassion, and a want to of understanding anybody else. A narcissist only cares about how this specific situation that we are dealing with right now, whether in a relationship, a job, a friendship, a family dynamic, makes me look and feel. Narcissists are awful at like accepting feedback. And you want to know why? Because they view everything as criticism and an attack. It's an assassination on my character. Mm-hmm. And when we make it to the point where like somebody doesn't care about you and your emotions and your feelings, your wants and your desires, yet in the very next breath saying, I love you. When somebody makes promises of being better, oh, I'm going to care more. I'm going to listen to you. Yet in the very next breath, blames and shames you for the exact reason why we got into this argument or this disagreement. We're talking about somebody who lacks the emotional maturity necessary to ever build any type of meaningful and long-lasting relationship. So, you know, the literal inflated sense of self-importance, constantly needing of attention, and when they don't get it, turns into World War III. A jerk could just be somebody having a bad day.
Right.
Hey, I'm running late. Give me my coffee. I need to get the heck out of here. They'll come back tomorrow though and be like, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you yesterday.
Right.
So the difference, as they say, is the difference.
Right. True. And I'm happy you're here and had your own experience with narcissistic behavior, because the biggest misconception I've heard is that narcissists are only men. So can you speak to that narcissists can be men and women and other? So, yeah.
Yeah. So there was a study probably 10 or 12 years ago. I want to say it was like university. It wasn't University of Harvard. It might have been University of Buffalo. And they found that men, of course, on average, and obviously because there are high levels of leadership positions, scored higher than being basically more exploitive, more entitled, and more grandiose in their actions and behaviors. So the estimate is that the disorder is found in about 7% of the men that population. I want to say they did about 500,000 people, and about 5% of women. So there's not a huge difference in those instances, but every study that shows narcissists exhibited, of course, that men, you know, performed, I guess you can say, at a higher level than women did. The thing I find most interesting about it is when we're talking about 100-plus-year-old disorder and we still have limited resources for statistics, and part of the reason why is, I think, a few things. Number one, there's no cure, right? And you're relying on someone who feels like they are of supreme importance, isn't compassionate, and is a lot of times egomaniacal to admit their actions and behaviors are negatively impacting the person that they're in a relationship or a friendship with. So it's unrealistic. It's like not likely to be very productive conversation to have with somebody to say, hey, I think your behavior, we should probably go see a therapist. I think the other thing, if we want to keep it all the way a buck, is in our community, we have a higher rate of it, but we also don't have the same type of access to therapists, to coaches, to be able to have the type of disposable income to support having somebody go seek that help or go get that help at an early enough age for us to catch it. So,
do you think narcissists can change? Because I've heard several clients say, I stayed 10, 15, 20 years because I thought
yeah.
they were going to change. They went to therapy, they promised therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think one can change?
It would depend on what your definition of change is. Because if we're talking about somebody who's, let's say, in a 20-year marriage, they've seen over and over that their spouse or their significant other is cheating, is lying, is deceptive, is yells and screams, doesn't change their behavior over time. A lot of times, and you probably see this a lot, they stick around for the kids, or they stick around because of the financial situation, and nobody ever wants to start over. I don't believe that I believe there could be marginal change. I don't believe that there is enough change, depending on the degree of their narcissism, enough of a change for them to change who they are. And you ever hear like, like old people are like, oh, I've been this way for 70 years. I've been this way for 80 years. I ain't going to change now. Fortunately or unfortunately enough, there probably was a time where they would, if they were somebody who was empathetic. At the end of the day, though, the one thing I will tell you is narcissists are conscious of their behavior and how it affects the people that are around them. So in that sense, if I'm dealing with somebody who knows that each time they apologize to me, that they lying their ass off and that they really ain't going to make any changes to themselves or to this relationship, then the reality is I need to think of me first, which is part of the bigger issue too. When we talk about people that stay long-term with narcissists. So
that's interesting. And another interesting point is I find a lot of high-functioning men and women get into relationships with narcissists, right? So I don't know if they believe it won't happen to them or what it is, but what are some signs that people can identify early on that trouble might be down the line?
I would say I would say four things. The first is the biggest indicator that I've noticed in every client that I've ever had, and that's the lack of empathy. The second is the lack of accountability. Third would be someone who possesses an extreme victim mentality. And lastly, somebody who likes to dominate your time, attention, and usually the conversation. So the lack of empathy I'll tackle first, which is definitely a big key, because for every person who has a genuine kindness in their heart, you see it typically through consistency. The thing you see with a narcissist is somebody who talks about others, doesn't feel bad for anybody, shames people for having emotions and acting like they're human and that they're vulnerable. This is the same person that will tell you that you're being too sensitive. Yet the moment you say anything about them, it seems like a criticism. It's like the end of the world. Why would you say that to me? Here's the silent treatment in response to that. The second, with lack of accountability. On one hand, right, a narcissist will tell you all the things they want and desire. They'll talk about what they want to do in their lives, with the relationship, with marriage, a career. But then they'll complain about all of the things blocking them from attaining it. So it's like, oh, well, Sally Joe, she really hates me. She won't let me do anything. I can't, it's like, oh, I would spend time with my kids, but my baby mama, she crazy. Like, it's everybody else's fault. The accountability can't fall on, hey, you know what? Maybe I should humble myself down and actually sit down with my ex-husband or my ex-wife or my ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend and have an adult conversation. But trying to do that, as you probably have experience with somebody who's that way, it's rinse and repeat cycle. The victim mentality, it can be so overbearing when you spend enough time with somebody, and we're talking about the world against me. My best friend, my sister, woe is me, everything. They just complain about everything. And one of the things that we commonly see when somebody gets out of a narcissistic relationship is they're just tired. I just want it to be over with. I just can't take it anymore. let's just figure this out and make it fast. And what do you probably see on your side? All right, cool. Well, let's do that if that's what you want to do. But I'm just going to warn you. And then you go to them with that still ain't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to give up 70%, still ain't good enough. I want 80.
Right. Right.
And then, of course, I would say, like in the early stages, dominating the conversation, which is pretty self-explanatory, but somebody who has an even more exciting story than you have.
Right.
Oh, let me tell you about the time I did too. Oh, you know what? I've been to Hawaii too. Like, it's just like, you don't have to this isn't a competition.
Right. Right. I think a lot of people, at least that I've talked to, they get stuck in that honeymoon stage, right? They've been through a cycle of the abuse and they feel like, yeah, they're going to change now. They promised me. They said they're going to therapy. They know they did wrong. They're going to change. Talk to that person. That it ain't going to change.
The one thing a narcissist, and this is how trauma bonds form, the one thing that a narcissist counts on is your hope.
Toxic
I always
hope.
say hope. I actually call, toxic hope. And then we do what I call toxic justification, where we justify their actions. So what do they do in the beginning? We meet, we start dating, we get into a relationship. Most times things move at the speed of light. Like, it is like intoxicating and the sex is amazing and we're going out and we're doing everything. Oh my goodness. And they're just so in love and the compliments, but they take up a lot of your time. And what you don't realize is they are isolating you. You're staying up late at night. You're going to meet them late at night. You're doing things throughout the course of the day. They get you hooked onto that. That's who you see. In those arguments, when they're belittling you, when they're shaming and blaming you for everything else, and they come back and give you a fake apology 15 minutes later, like, hey, I didn't mean to, but you remember, you kind of made me. It was kind of your fault. You're like, well, they've changed for 2 days. That's the hope. We do the justification side of it. And there's something within us, right? The way we weren't loved. I had abandonment issues from my childhood. My dad wasn't around from the moment I was 2 years old. I had no fond memories. I had no going to the beach. It wasn't until about 6 years ago when me and my wife were sitting down having a conversation and she's like, why can't you? Like, I'm not a hugger. I'm not and obviously I have a house full of women. Okay. So I had to change.
Yes.
But I have empathy enough to change. I had self-awareness enough to change. So I think with that being said, there has to be consistency in the behavior on each end. Are you showing me who you are? Because we all show up right in the beginning. All as as Chris Rock once said in one of his stand-up specials, you're meeting somebody's representative in the beginning. We all want to show up as our best. But the inconsistency, the ghosting, the silent treatment, oh, I've been so busy. Well, I make time to pee. I make time to eat a sandwich. I make time to go down the street. I make time to walk the dog. There should be time to sit down as adults and have conversations. When you don't see immediate, I'm going to use corporate jargon. When you don't see immediate and sustained improvement after that, it's probably time to let go.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. They, like you said, they justify and justify until they can't do it anymore. And so typically where I get people is the relationship is over. You know, a lot of times my clients are ghosted. And so they're kind of forced to go down this route. So that's extremely challenging to do the silent treatment, to start your healing process when you are forced to deal with this person at the same time. So what are some of your recommendations for someone that is just getting out of this relationship? They cannot do their self-healing just yet. How do they manage the stress of dealing with the divorce and unpacking everything that they went through?
I would say two things. Anytime I have a client, there are two questions I always ask them in the beginning, in that first initial session. What do you love about yourself? And what did you love about your ex? And what do you think the answers are on both fronts? It usually turns into like well, there was that time in the beginning where they showed me X, Y, and Z. It usually turns into like a fight to explain what they love even about themselves, because we get so lost, we get so consumed by a relationship, especially like just moves fast and the butter. Like a mentor once told me, sometimes it's hard to discern the difference in the beginning, as old folks will say, discerning the difference, because red flags and butterflies all feel the same. Yes. So we rush right into these relationships And but if I can't fully love myself, which is what we try to figure out after, or what you hopefully figure out after, if I can't have a level of confidence in setting and sticking to my boundaries, how the hell can I expect somebody to come in and love me at my best? I don't even love me at my worst right now. How can I love me at my best? So when I think about the levels that we have to go to do some self-assessment, some self-awareness, to go down the rabbit hole of trauma and revisiting our past, like, how do we learn how to love? We learn how to love from our earliest years. Did you get a hug? I said in a video the other day, and I got tons of DMs on it. I was like, you need a hug. Because you didn't get that hug when you was a 10-year-old little boy or little girl. You didn't get your father coming home and telling you, hey, this is how you shoot a basketball. You didn't get the attention that you wanted. So now we overcompensate. And now we become codependent on the person that we're in a relationship or a marriage with. And we hope that they could just build us up. But what if you walk into a monster? What if you meet a monster of a human being who just uses all of that empathy and that compassion and tears you down, and then, into your point, ghosts you? Well, I got to start at scratch. And now we live in except if you call it LA traffic, we live in like a 24-hour, like Amazon got it at my door. They flying it and dropping it off at my porch now. So at the end of the day, there has to be a level of self-awareness that goes along with what we've experienced, and acceptance level that comes with it. But I think also, and I say this a lot in videos, like, there has to be a level of grace.
Yes.
We have to give ourselves grace for learning, for not knowing what we didn't know before I actually had a chance to learn it.
Right. And you brought up a good point. How do you tell the difference between butterflies and red flags?
Usually we know. You know why? So a lot of times what I'll see with clients is I'll be like, hey, so tell me about how your body changed in the relationship. And I'll be like, what do you mean? I'd be like, tell me about your physical changes. Well, I used to go to the gym, and, I used to eat healthy, and I used to do this, or I gained weight. I started eating more, or I started eating less. My hair started falling out. I started getting anxiety. I got on depression meds. So a lot of times our body tells us before we're willing to accept it. During the relationship, if I am in a relationship where I pull into the driveway, and I'm not talking about like I had a long day at work, I had a bunch of clients and blah, blah, that I had going on. And I'm just tired because I worked in the loft. I was in the court all day. I'm talking about getting there and like, all right, trying to basically role play how this conversation is going to go, walking on eggshells, because I know if I say the wrong thing, I already had a rough day, I'm going to cry. It's just going to be too much for me. It's going to be overwhelming. So when we talk about butterflies and red flags, at the end of the day, we know, we can feel it deep down in our soul. I know this is weird that, that they're yelling and screaming and threw something at the wall early on in the relationship, but he said he had a rough childhood. She said that, she has a bad relationship with her mother. So I'm going to give them a benefit of the doubt. And each time you give them the benefit of the doubt, this is where our potential meter goes. But they can change. I could change it. You know what's crazy? We think our love is so magical.
Yes.
We just think we could just like roll some dice, throw some pixie dust in the air, and like somebody they just going to be like magical. It's like in sports where they're like, this player they played for 10 different teams, but the next team is like, we could turn. No, everybody already tried that.
Right.
Everybody already gave all that effort. And what you don't realize is you think they tell you, oh, my exes were crazy. Oh, there's this picture painted out of washable kids paint. And when it starts raining outside,
right,
then you're like, oh, this is what I signed up for.
Right.
So it becomes like, we know those red flags and butterflies. We just refuse to accept it. Oh, it's different. It's exciting. It's magical. And your parents is like, something about him,
right,
something about her.
Right. So I think it's important for people to hear from people that have blossomed from that experience. Can you share, your story and kind of how you got here? Because you're thriving now after the experience. So can you share with us how that happened?
Yeah. Last time was actually out of a friendship that I had, a really close friendship. And fortunately or unfortunately, um, it wasn't until things got to the point where I had to make decisions on, we had worked together, where I had to make decisions on like letting them go, where it was like, oh, this is who you, oh, this is why everybody else was leaving. This is why, right? And there becomes this level of um, fear that you feel leaving, right? Because it's like, whether it's a relationship or a friendship, you're just kind of like, man, that's a lot of years. That's a lot of time. And I say this a lot, but like, we never get a refund on that time investment. Like, we never get that time back. So a lot of times it's just holding on to like those are the prime years of my life. And I'm going to be 40. I'm going to be 50. I'm going to be 30. At the end of the day, we have to place ourselves in a position where we say, what about me? I always ask clients that too. I'm like, what about you? Because if you notice, like, the conversation always shifts. So for me, it was the acceptance piece. It was realizing there was a piece within me that was missing, that I was like, oh, wait, I allowed this because I was either, and I knew my body was telling me too. When I got around, I was just like, oh, I'm not going to tell. I'm not, when you can't share news with somebody, when you can't be like authentically you 24/7, I mean, like, you joke around, when you can't be that person, something's wrong. There's your red flags and butterflies. When I feel like I can't be me around you, whether we friends, family, I'll love you from a distance because I can't put myself through that again. So I think that realization for me coming out on the other side was more so understanding I need to love me more. I need to appreciate my time more, and I need to value my energy because I ain't getting that time back. So now I'm going to invest in people that invest back into me.
And that is a big piece. I think a lot of people, it's easy to say, oh, this person did this happened to me. But it's very, very hard to say, well, what is my part in this, right? Because none of us want to believe that we kind of attracted this into our lives, or we accepted this in our lives. So how do you deal with that? Like, what are the steps that someone can take to kind of rediscover who they are and slowly start to deal with this process?
I would say anytime, like after a breakup or divorce, it turns into like an emotional whirlwind. We do so much, and from a grieving perspective, like, we do so much bargaining. We constantly blame ourselves. There's anger, there's rage. And then that leads to resentment that we carry. And I think the hardest part of any separation, no matter how long or brief the relationship was, is we feel like we wasted our damn time. And what I always tell people is that we have an opportunity. I could either look at this as an opportunity to build and grow, although it may be setbacks financially, emotionally, physically. I might have to get a new place. I might have to set up new bank accounts. I might have to hire a lawyer I can't afford. So it's hard to come to grips with that reality. There's also like the flip side of the anger that we have to kind of channel. And I always say that it's healthy. Like, people are like, when will my anger go away? I'm so angry. I'm so mad that, like, there's a relief in knowing that you can feel that way. Because the other question I always get, well, was I the narcissist? The fact that you care to know if you were the narcissist probably tells me you weren't. Probably tells me you weren't the narcissistic one in the relationship. It probably tells me that you wanted it to work. Probably tells me you still have some empathy and some love and compassion in your heart. But I can't give somebody something they don't have. And they didn't come, this is like some obsolete toy that, like, we can't no longer bring back to the market. I can't remanufacture this. I can't go back to their childhood and give them the love they didn't have. I can't make up for that trauma of them being abandoned at an early age. I can't tell them, hey, you know what, your mom or your dad was going to be an alcoholic and they're not going to spend the time with you, or you're going to be resentful. Like, I can't do all of those things. What I can do is look in the mirror and say, I lost all this weight. I gained all this weight. My hair is falling out. I could do better. I deserve better. And it can start as small as affirmations. I'm beautiful. I'm wonderful. I'm charming. I'm kind, right? Those are all the things I'm looking for when I ask that client, what do you love about yourself? But they've been so beat down for so long that they're just like, I'm just tired. I want to go to sleep. But it's really not exhaustion from like going to sleep. It's exhaustion of your soul. It's exhaustion of arguing every single. It is tiresome.
Mm-hmm.
It is just one thing, and then oh, here goes something else in the mail. Here we go, again. Oh, I thought this divorce was final. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
No, all right. So they're asking for, and I know from your perspective, you're just like, ugh.
Right.
So they're asking for this.
Yeah.
Now, here's the flip side. Like, so it becomes again, all consuming. But my mother used to say something to me all the time, just 2 words. She said, be still. Most times, narcissistic people, toxic people, they'll reveal themselves for who they are. You just need to be still. You don't always need to say something. You don't always need to have a response. And I never realized how powerful silence is, because they hate that. They hate when you're quiet. They hate when they haven't heard anything back, because they're so what they're used to. FaceTime calls. They spent all that time. You got addicted. It's like coming off of a drug.
Right.
So it's a process, in all caps.
But I think a lot of people skip the process, right? And then they jump right into another relationship. So what can we tell those people that, to me, that's a disaster waiting to happen. That's why second marriages, the divorce rate is almost 80%. So what is your take on
that? When we leave familiarity of a relationship, and we're unsure, it's easy to try to get caught up in the quick fix. And the quick fix is me depending on somebody else for my validation and my emotions. There's something to be said about somebody who can find solace in their solitude. Somebody who can be alone without being lonely. Mm-hmm. Like somebody that has a level of confidence enough in themselves. And sometimes you have to regain that confidence to say, you know what? I remember what I looked like before that relationship. I remember how vibrant I was. I remember so a lot of that is like reconnection and reintegration, right? It's reconnecting with those family members that you abandoned, and all the time, most people come to me and they go to lawyers and they go to therapists because they ain't got nobody else to tell. Because who the hell who would believe me?
Right.
Because what do we do in public? Oh, put on the smile, you go to the family barbecue, everything is all good. You show up and everybody's all happy and oh my goodness, they know how to put on.
Oh yes.
Oh, they know how to shake hands and kiss babies and oh my goodness, and so they think you're living a dream, but nobody knows what's going on in those 4 walls. And when you get in that car, what you got an attitude? You're just like, so now the fear, the anxiety. Yeah. I thought we just had a good weekend. I thought we just had a good vacation. No, because they thrive off of impulse. And it's so hard for us to heal after because we started thriving off that impulse, that chaos. So the sound of silence is deafening to us in no contact. But they said they loved me 2 days ago, but we just had sex a week ago. But he's already dating somebody new. That's because those rebound relationships was 10%. I want to say the number is 10, 11% of those actually wind up being long-term. Mm-hmm. So the reality is most of them are going to fail. And to your point, marriages skyrocketing in the 70 and 80%. And second marriages, it's already bad enough that half of them, like half of us rush into these marriages anyway without even knowing the person that we're marrying. And that's a solid commitment. And it's also a legal and binding commitment.
Right.
So now I'm putting my money, I'm putting all my assets, I'm putting all of that stuff on the table. So I think the familiarity of getting us back right is important. And you can't skip steps. You can't be like, hey, let me get into a relationship. It's been 2 months. This person makes me happy. I'm on Tinder. I'm on Bumble. I'm just going to date. And that's a really good distraction. But when you get in the relationship and a year in and the same issues are now manifesting themselves again, and now, oh, they're toxic. Oh, they're narcissistic. No, you just didn't take time to realize you have taken on some of those toxic traits.
Right.
There's a darkness we take on when we leave relationships like that.
Absolutely. So I think where a lot of clients struggle too once they start the process is like, oh my God, how toxic it actually was, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're finally out of it, you're like, oh my God, I was going through that. Yeah. So what do you tell that person that is coming to terms with the fact that they were in a very toxic relationship, but they also have to go through this divorce process. So I see a lot of them arguing with the other, engaging the other party. I see them obsessing over social media. So what would you say? I mean, because I can only do so much. So
Yeah.
what would you say?
Self-discovery and patience. Also no contact. I cannot stress enough, how difficult it is for somebody to hear that and be like, but we got kids, but we got blah, blah, which is why the court system now has things like apps and communicating through things that you can get written into your court order in order for you to proceed in these processes correctly. The difficult part is, especially if like you're a parent, you don't understand how that bleeds into your relationship with your kids. You think you're protecting them by staying. We think that we're strong by showing them, oh no, you need to have two parents. Well, that's great because the statistics show that two-parent households are building and breeding, better, more successful individuals, men and women in this world. But at the end of the day, there has to be some sense of pride that I have within myself where I say, I'm already done with that. The going back and forth, the arguing, and trust me, I'm speaking from personal experience. I know exactly what it's like. Oh, well, they said this in the email. Well, I'm going to say that. What you mean you're dropping her off late?
Yeah.
And we just think we got to win. We got to win everything. Kids are very perceptive, and they likely knew long before you even knew. They knew something was off. They knew how right? I said you're physical. They knew how your body language changed when mommy or daddy was around. They knew all of these things. So in order for me to be in a better position to say, let me let go of this, we crave control. So the same control we didn't want the narcissistic person to have over us, we now want to have over them after they done moved on. Not to add, not everybody is what they post to be.
Right.
What the hell? I'm supposed to post myself crying on social media? Oh my goodness, I'm so sad. I'm so upset. I can't believe it. My world is ending. Post a whole bunch of Sade songs like sad and sad. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you that I'm living it up. I'm going to show you that I'm out with friends. I'm going to show you that I'm out on a date. Those are the things that I'm going to show. Internally, I'm the same egomaniacal individual. And again, what do we do in the beginning? What do we show our friends and our family? That everything is fine. So we think perception is reality. But they look happy. But she and him went on a vacation that he told me he was going to take me on. Or she said that we was going to do that together. Or that I could come to the game. But okay. As my mom said, be still. Just sit your ass down somewhere. Be patient with yourself, because we're always in a rush to hurry up and get to some destination we have literally never been to before. I don't know where Healing's address is. I don't know when I'm ready to get back on that app. A good barometer, probably somewhere between 7 months to a year. If I've been through it in a 10-year marriage, a 10-year relationship, I probably need to take some time to figure me out and be okay with that time. And also be okay with friends and family not knowing what the hell I'm talking about. Well, what you mean? You said that everything was, how come you never told me? Which is why they seek out coaches and therapists. And then they got to go get a divorce lawyer. And then you're like, well, technically I'm just handling the legal stuff.
Right.
But let me point you in the right direction that can get you some help with this other stuff, because you need to handle that too. So at the end of the day, if we don't deal with it, we just going to bleed on somebody who didn't cut us.
I've learned so much myself, but the biggest is being still, right? It's okay to take time. It's okay to not have a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you're into. It is okay. And I think a lot of people feel they have something to prove to people because they're no longer in a relationship and they feel inadequate or whatever that they may feel. But there's something to be said to taking the time and refilling yourself so you can attract exactly what you deserve and what you want. And so as we end, what are your last words of wisdom for us?
Oh, man. I would say to definitely stay true to who you are at a core level. Too many times we try to get it cute and try to look up quotes and strategies. And like we try to get really, and businesses say this a lot, keep it simple, stupid. Some people, keep it short and simple. A lot of times the best route is the easiest one. It is the road most traveled, where it's like actually putting in the work and taking those stops along the way at each and every single house that you pass to say, all right, this is my therapist's door. All right, this is my best friend's door. All right, this is my mama's door. Using those resources that you have. But the problem becomes that we don't really necessarily have a barometer for what successful relationships look like. What does a healthy relationship even look like to you? Did you see mom and dad married for 30 or 40 years? Okay, great. Well, you have a barometer for what successful marriages look like, but what was the household like? Was everybody arguing? Was everybody slamming doors? Was everybody used to giving each other the silent treatment? So then in that case, we're conditioned better than an Olympian athlete. I'm conditioned to deal with that type. Oh, okay. She's giving me the silent treatment. So I guess we just won't talk for 2 days and then things will be all better. We get in these comfort zones. This is what we've conditioned to do. And society tells us, don't be vulnerable. Don't go cry in the car. Don't tell nobody what's going on. Right. Which is why it was important for me to speak on like, hey, being a man and dealing with these issues. Right. But it's like, oh man, well, it's a lot of women in your comments. I'm like, you should see the men in my DMs, in my email, in my coaching sessions. So this isn't exclusive to just like, oh, well, hey, just men and women and, the X, Y, and Z. If you ever watch any of my content, which you do, but in general, when people watch my content, they're like, I like that you don't, you're not just like men these days, women these days. No, we both messed up. Mm-hmm. We both got drama. We both got issues. We both got things that we're going through on a day-to-day basis that puts us in a position where we question our own sanity at points. And whether that's male or female, it does not matter. I just need to be better for me. And I deserve that. You deserve that. Your kids deserve that. Your family deserves the best of you, but I can't give them the best of me if I can't give me the best of me.
Wow. You are so amazing. I want to thank you yet again for coming on Legally Uncensored. For all of you that do not follow Weav, please, please, please go find him. I believe it's Weav Told Me on Instagram, right?
Yeah, they're all Weav Told Me, Instagram, IG, Weav Told Me, TikTok. Yeah, I'm on all. That's all at Weav Told Me.
And he's being all polite and nice today, but he is actually very funny on social media. And he has content every single day. So
that's right. 365.
You do. So do yourself a favor and go follow Weav. And of course, continue to follow Legally Uncensored. And until next time, I am your host, Demetria Graves.